Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Grand Cruise Astrology. My name is Clayton Cruz. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the solar eclipse that's happening in the sky this weekend. And primarily, this eclipse, it is a full on eclipse. It is primarily going to be seen over China, Middle East, and Central Africa. But astrologically, it's going to be affecting all of us in some capacity in some place in our life. So let's get to it because we have a lot to talk about with this eclipse. It is a powerful eclipse, and it's making some significant aspects. So, first off, this eclipse happening at 0 degrees Cancer right on the solstice, okay? Just after we cross that solstice point, summer solstice. So, that in and of itself, without any aspects, that alone is significant. 0 degrees Cancer represents new beginnings. Okay, so in and of itself, 0 degrees, you can look at that and say, okay, there's something here with this eclipse, something very very significant. It's a north node eclipse. So if you've watched my videos about the nodes, you know that the north node is about a power surge, energy coming in. So we have north node eclipses and we have south node eclipses. This is a north node eclipse. The last eclipse we had 2 weeks ago, south node eclipse. So the eclipse we had 2 weeks ago, that was more about release, and it was more about with Mars involved. It was a lot about tearing down a lot of things that we no longer felt relevant and dispersing. It was a lot of dispersing. It's called the dragon's tail. So the dragon's head is the north node, which has to do with new energy coming in. The dragon's tail is about old energy going out. It has a lot to do with, it can be seen as new energy coming in as the food, and the dragon's tail is the excrement. Okay, there are a lot of different ways to look at it. I like to look at it as dragon's head, dragon's tail, energy coming in, energy going out. It's a very classical Jyotish way to look at the nodes. So with this is a north node eclipse, bringing a lot of energy into the sign of Cancer, right there at 0 degrees. Because this is 0 degrees Cancer, it's going to have a lot to do with new beginnings. Okay, so Cancer as a cardinal sign, one of the four cardinal signs, is at in the sky. It's at a solstice point, and so it has to do with new beginnings anyway. Start of summer, you could say, in the West. So it has to do with new beginnings anyway. So at 0 degrees, it's especially the case. So new beginnings. Well, what kind of new beginnings are we talking about? With Cancerian energy, we're talking about lunar energy. Okay, so even though the eclipse, the solar eclipse is very much about, it involves the sun, and it's the sun moon conjunct, so that the sun and moon are harmonious. This is more of a lunar energy, even though the sun is a power player here, because the solar eclipses are power players when it comes to eclipses, because they bring in the outward manifestation of events. And so even though we have the sun very active here, it is in a lunar sign of Cancer. So Cancer is ruled by the moon in traditional astrology. So the moon in Cancer expresses itself very unfettered, and emotions have no they're not at all curtailed. They feel, the moon in Cancer feels no need to rein itself in. Its emotions are genuine, its emotions are true, but they can be very expressive and out there, and very dramatic even. So with the moon in Cancer, we're going to be getting an influx of this new energy. Okay, this new emotional energy, emotional expression. Because it's a solar eclipse, we're probably going to see this manifest in the outside world in some capacity, or at least it is with this eclipse creating, with the new moon eclipse, creating the seed for it throughout the next couple of weeks, next couple of months. Okay, as we get further away from it, it's going to get less and less severe. However, in the beginning, it could be very charged. So that is that is the basic energy you have with the new moon eclipse in the sign of Cancer, solar eclipse. So, as I said, the moon is very charged. It has a lot of energy, a lot of lunar expression. We're probably going to be a lot of us connecting with a very folksy energy. This can be very tribal. It can be very security oriented, family oriented. Has a lot to do with roots, family of origin. I mean, we're seeing a lot of this, and so it is right on time. Okay, it is right on time. This energy. Okay, now with the sun there, the sun is about identity. Okay, and so the sun doesn't necessarily do so well in Cancer because the sun is about self reliance. It's about personal identity and individual. Okay, whereas the lunar energy of Cancer is very much about needing other people and needing. I mean, we are social creatures. We need connection. We need family. We need support. Okay, and so with this new moon eclipse in I'm sorry, this new moon solar eclipse in the sign of Cancer, there's going to be a lot of energy around wanting to connect with others. Okay, so the sun is in a way it's there, it's present, and it is a solar eclipse manifested in the external world, but the moon's kind of leading the way here. It's in its power, and so um, the advice with this is to be to try to be objective, okay, to try to have a little bit of uh, temperament and bring a little bit of conscious thought into our expression. I only say that because it's going to, as time goes on, it's going to help us be in a place where we don't have any ill feelings about what we've said or what we've done, because this is a very charged time, and we could get very ahead of ourselves and just fly off the handle and say and do things that maybe we get further away from it and we say, wow, that was a little extreme. Okay, so just be aware that this is a possibility and that this is out there. However, when the sun and moon are connected, they're on the same page. Okay, in the beginning, so early on, especially. So as we get away from this eclipse and we get closer to the full moon, 2 weeks from now, you know, it is going to be with the waxing of the moon. There's going to be a slow building of awareness around what this full moon represents. Okay, and I'm going to get more into what this full moon represents, but understand in the beginning, it's like a seed, and so our thoughts, our mind, our sense of self, our identity is very much connected to this lunar energy at 0 degrees. This newness, this birthing. Okay, this is a lot about birthing. Cancer is the sign is the sign of the moon. It's maternal. It is about labor. It's about birth. So, I mean, just on a very practical level, on a very biological level, this is a very fertile time. So understand this is I would say astrologically on paper, I'm looking at this and I'm seeing fertility. Like, so if that's your intention, go for it. This is a great energy to help conceive. If either biologically or if it's a project or something, but something that has to do with these lunar manifestations, which have to do with our emotion, can have to do with caretaking, with loyalty, with family, with community. These kinds of things. It's a very charged energy for that, conceiving something new and birthing it. Okay, now if birthing physically, birthing a child is not something that is on the menu for you, then just be aware that this energy is there and take whatever precautions you need to take. So that's the advice with that. Now that's just the energy of the sun and moon coming together with an eclipse. Okay, that's just the basic energy. But this energy is taking place in a larger spectrum of activity in the sky. So we, as did another video about, we have Mercury going retrograde, okay, during this eclipse. Now, it's not going to be aspecting the eclipse at 0 degrees. It's going to be, Mercury is still toward the middle of Cancer, whereas the eclipse is in the beginning of Cancer. So it's not touching it exactly. However, it's still in the same sign, and it's connected because it's in the same sign. So I did that video about Mercury going retrograde in Cancer and how that represents doing a sort of mental, uh, almost objective inventory about our emotional nature and what triggers us, and just getting very uh, practical about what that looks like, and just doing an inventory and saying, okay, well, is this serving me? Me flying off the handle about this, is this serving me? Or is me, you know, um, expressing my emotion in this way, is this optimal? Or is it not? Is it, or is it not? Where can I, accentuate that if it's useful, and where can I let it go if it's not? I mean, the Mercury retrograde is asking us to take an inventory of how our responses and our reactions, okay, and just get very practical about it. Now, with this new moon eclipse, with this solar eclipse here, um, it's going to bring a lot of energy into that process. So there may be some things that are charged and seen that are happening on an internal level that we're going to be looking at, and Mercury is going to say, wow, okay, now the emotional charge is there for me to actually take a strong look at it mentally and see, does this stay or does this go? Now, I know this is a lot of words, and it's getting very, you know, behind the eyes, and it's very, because we're dealing with the unconscious. We're dealing with the unconscious. We're talking about Cancer. We're talking about the moon. We're talking about a new moon. And we're talking about eclipse, and a lot of energy coming into that space, and then Mercury trying to make sense of it, right? So, it's not really easy to put into words. With Mercury retrograde, it's certainly not easy to put into words what it is that we're doing. This deep dive that I talked about with the Mercury retrograde, it just picks up steam with this eclipse. I mean, it gets supercharged, right? So, I mean, that's sort of what we're dealing with. I do think this is going to have quite an expression once we get to the full moon. And there's going to be an eclipse on the full moon as well, a couple weeks out. That full moon is not going to be it's not going to be a full eclipse, lunar eclipse, but it is going to be in the sign of Capricorn, and it is going to be aspected in some tense way. So I do see some things coming to expression that are going to be released through this process, this lunar cycle. So that's that. Now, how is it at? So I said, we have Mercury going retrograde, and that's it's connected to the retrograde that already started, yes. And now we're getting the power surge with the eclipse. Now, going to the more significant, I don't want to say significant. That's not a good word. Maybe more challenging aspect. And I say challenging because, whereas the Mercury retrograde and the eclipse itself, in a lot of ways it can be very personal because it is Cancer, and it is a deep dive on an emotional level. This can all be very personal, even if it's expressed outwardly. It still feels very personal and hits very close to home. There is another energy in the sky that is connecting with this eclipse through a quincunx. Now, a quincunx aspect, I should probably say it's disconnecting with the eclipse, because a quincunx aspect is 150 or 210 degrees, depending on which way you look at it, and you cut the pie up, right? So it represents a disconnect, a disconnective energy, two energies that don't see each other, that are acting without consideration for the other, okay? With the quincunx aspect, it's not about integration, because there are two energies that don't have any common ground. So when you're dealing with a quincunx aspect, it's about understanding how the two energies can coexist and what adjustments need to be made so the two energies can coexist together. That is the challenge. It's a very challenging aspect, and it can be very hard to understand. So in this case, we have the eclipse, okay, at 0 degrees Cancer, a very personal, a very subjective, a very emotional, a very familial, a very tribal, a very loyal energy. Okay? Sorry, I've got an itch on my nose that keeps bothering me. So, anyway, so it's very tribal, emotional, loyal energy. And then you have Saturn, the planet Saturn at 0 degrees Aquarius. Saturn has been going retrograde. I've talked a lot about Saturn in past videos. It's in the sign of Aquarius. What is Aquarius? Aquarius is it's a very mental energy. It's very dry. It's very cool. It's very group oriented, but in an impersonal kind of way. It has to do with future thinking. It can be very much oriented towards systems of group. It has to do with the group container and systems therein that will contain the group. And it's very different in Cancer. I mean, you can kind of see just by these words I'm throwing out there. These two energies, they don't have any really common ground. I mean, they don't. I mean, I guess you could kind of tie in some of these words together, maybe. But these energies in astrology, at their degrees, at their angles, in theory, they don't connect. And so this eclipse is about. It's going to be about, as I understand it, these two energies coming into expression. The seed is at the new moon, with these energies, being experienced and birthed as two separate energies that are disconnected. And at the full moon, they're going to come to expression. At the full moon, in a couple weeks, that's where we get down to brass tacks about how we integrate what was birthed at the new moon. Okay. And we'll have an eclipse to further that process along. Okay. But in the beginning, it's this seed and this slow unfolding throughout the 2 weeks, this revelation of these two energies that have no common ground. Okay, so that's what we're working with now. Again, solar eclipses have to do with manifestations in the world. Lunar eclipses have to do with more on a personal level in theory, but this is in a sign of Cancer, so this is going to be affecting us all on an individual level, on a personal level, right? So not only are we going to be looking at this out in the world and having revelations around these two energies that don't connect, and like conversations about how to connect these energies and what to do, this and that. Okay, but this conversation is also going to be going on inside of us. How can it not? This is Cancer. This is it's very personal. Okay, so it's throughout this 2 weeks. It's going to be a time of understanding where we have specific thoughts for our future, the direction we're headed, what we think is right, wrong, what we think is fair, what we, these are Aquarian words, what we think is just, what we think is group-minded and good for all, right? Utilitarian. That's Saturn in Aquarius, right? So, where we kind of have these calculations in our mind about this, and while at the same time we may have these thoughts and ideas and even express that verbally, right? Communication through the air sign of Aquarius. However, how is that matching up with our feelings, our reactions, how we truly feel, our security-minded nature, our families? Are we, putting out one face in public, and then we go home, and it has a completely different meaning, right? Like, it's like, or is it like, like, oh yes, I I feel this way out in the world, but if it's going to come into my home space, well, no way in hell. You know what I mean? Like there could be a disconnect between that more outgoing, collective, future thinking, utilitarian, what's good for all, and our more personal feelings about the situation. Okay, we may not even be conscious that there is a disconnect, but that's what this eclipse is going to be about, and it's going to bring it into consciousness so that we are more aligned ultimately. And it's eclipses. This is 2020. There's a lot going on. There's a very challenging time. The full moon eclipse, it's going to have its own challenges too. Now, there is also a square to Mars. It's very loose, and I almost didn't even mention it, but I will mention it. The reason that it's within 6 degrees, so technically, as far as I would say, I'd say that does have relevance. However, it's not square by sign. Okay, you can have aspects that are an aspect by sign and by degree. Okay, it's very technical, I know, and we'll do another video about that some other time. But understand, there's a loose eclipse to Mars. Mars is in the sign of Pisces, and the eclipse is at 0 degrees Aquarius. So, there could be some tension, okay, around this. Mars is about tension. It's about Mars in Pisces is going to be about wanting to push for what physically push and take action for what is just, and in support of that which is considered the downtrodden or the sick or those that can't speak for themselves, kind of thing. That's Mars in Pisces. Now, Mars in Pisces can also be not have perspective. So Mars always needs perspective, right? So that's something to keep in mind with this energy. But in the sign, with this eclipse in the sign of Cancer, there could be some tension there at early Cancer, but I don't see it. I don't see it being as challenging as it otherwise could be with this tension. I think it's going to be. I think what we're more going to be dealing with is recognizing that there's a disconnect with the other aspect, that Saturnian aspect. I think that's more what we're going to be dealing with now. What's more on the table? I do think with that Mars aspect, though, it is going to give us a little taste of the tension that is to come later in the year, because Mars is not far from going into Aries. In fact, for the full moon eclipse, it will be in Aries, and that will be a more tense aspect with Mars. So with this tension, with this eclipse, it is giving us a little taste of that Mars energy. Mars is going to be in, when it goes into Aries, it's going to be in there for like 4 months, and it's going to go retrograde in Aries. It's going to be making all kinds of turbulent aspects to the sign of Capricorn. So we're getting a little bit of taste of that, but I don't think that's the prime mover right now. I think this is more about it's a little bit more personal. It's a little bit more emotional, even though it does have a little bit of an outward focus with the sun. So the advice, let's just keep with the deep dive. Keep with that emotional inventory that we started with, that Mercury going retrograde. All right, keep with that. It's going to get supercharged. We're probably going to be feeling a little touchy, a little. There could be a tendency to want to hang on to what's dear to us, whether it's ideas or people, family, situations. There could be there could be a push to want to stick to what you got, right? Stick to your own. There could be that tendency. So try and be open, because as we get closer to the full moon, we're going to be there's going to be more revelation about how we can bring these energies that starting out seem disparate and completely disconnected, there's going to be more revelation about how we can bring them together and integrate those energies. Okay, so it's a process. It's there's a lot happening, and it's not necessarily it may be difficult to make sense of at times. So, but it is an apex point. This is big. This is the words of comfort I can give it. This is not intended to be easy breezy time. This is intended to be a time of very, very severe change, both internally, which is going to manifest externally. So that's what I got. I'll make another video about Venus going direct later in the week, and that's nice. Okay, it's a little bit about how some of our interpersonal communications can get a little more traction. We can feel like we're moving forward. So, this time there's a lot of things going on, and it's kind of a mixed bag. And so throughout this lunar cycle, just hang in there. And as you're doing the deep dive, try to have fun, because when Venus goes direct, it's going to ask us to socialize a little bit more and have a little bit more fun, while at the same time taking this deep dive and doing this very deep, serious, and needed inner work that we're all doing. Okay, so I'll leave it at that. Good luck with these energies. Hang in there, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.